A 1 2, a 1 2, a 1 2, a 1 2. I like to introduce myself. My name is Miss Vani. All right, beauty people, trying something a little different today. So I'm on a hunt for a good microphone, really. I'm sure you can tell my videos are not the fancy kind, and I'm okay with that. But I'm looking for a microphone that makes my voice sound the way that I want it to sound without me sounding too loud or muffled. So the microphone that I have, the little lapel mic, it's just me personally. I don't necessarily like the way my voice sounds in it. When it's up on my shirt, no matter how I have it positioned, it sounds weird. And then it's like I have to hold it. But then if I hold it, it sounds a little too loud. And I'm not trying to shout at you guys. I'm just trying to get a point across. So the next few weeks, what my plan is to be teaching nails. So I want to start off with nail tips, which is what I'll be talking to you a little bit about today. We'll just be going over the procedure on how to properly do nail tips. And then the next time when my model is here, hi mom, I will demonstrate to you how to do nail tips. Now that sounds like something so little, and you would think that, well, why does that matter? That's something so little. But that is something that, believe it or not, could be a cause of your nails coming off. Excuse me. If you have problems with your nails popping off. So there's more than one reason for that, and I'll get into that when I do acrylics. But one reason is the tips are not glued on correctly. Some people, now I already did a video called nail glue versus nail resin. What's the difference? Watch that video. That's one of my most viewed videos that I have. And it's a really short video just telling you the difference between nail glue and nail resin. So watch that video so you'll understand better why some people need nail resin versus nail glue. If their skin is more oily and their nails tend to get more oily from their skin, not that nails have oil glands, they don't, but they may tend to get more oily because of that person's skin. The nails will pop off more easily. Also fungus. Sometimes you will notice if you get a full set, there's an opening there and you will notice brown or green underneath. So what I learned in teaching about nails is that there's no such thing as mold on the nails, even though the book mentions it. It's actually bacteria waste. So that means through the reproduction process, which, remember, bacteria reproduce 16 million around about in a 12-hour period, right? So those bacteria, while they're reproducing, they're also excreting waste. And so that brown or that green that you see is not mold, it's actually bacteria poo, just to say it more bluntly. And unfortunately, what's been known in the past, and I'm sure some of them still do it now, even after COVID would have taught us a lesson, but obviously sometimes it has not, because I hear from my students how their nail techs treat them. What you'll find is the nail tech will just file that off and then apply a new nail or a new acrylic over it. But that doesn't mean that that bacteria has gone, and that has actually become a fungus. So that doesn't mean that it's gone. Anyway, with that being said, you saw me writing. So what I was writing is the required materials for nail tip procedures. And this is when, let's say if you're just doing nail tips for fun, let's say you just want to practice before you get into acrylics, this would be that procedure. This actually used to be a state board procedure where you had to glue the tip on and make it flush with the nail so that you cannot tell that that person has a nail tip on. And some people actually use this procedure in preparation for their acrylics. So I want to thank you so much for watching my videos. Tell you God bless you. Thank you for your support. And if you watch these videos and you feel like you're learning and you enjoy my videos, please just share and like the videos, and I'd appreciate that. Okay, let's get started. Okay, well, hold on, let me make sure I have this right. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is, what are nail tips? Nail tips are plastic, but they are made differently. So don't always try to go for the cheaper nail tips. What you're looking for, and it's unfortunate because if you order online, you won't know until you get them, but you're looking for a nail tip that is flexible. And I should have brought my nail tips with me. Hold on, let me go get my nail tips real quick. Okay, so I got my nail tips here. Now, don't judge because these are not name brand tips. This was something that I ordered off of Amazon because I wanted to be able to demonstrate the procedure to you guys. And where I work right now, I don't physically teach classes. So right now, YouTube is my only outlet to actually teach. So I don't have access to the supplies that I had when I had my own classroom. But I can tell you what I've worked with and my experience with those things. And so right now, sometimes I just order from Amazon just for demo purposes. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. But what I'm telling you is, because you don't know until you actually get the product if it's good or not, that's what you're looking for. Okay, so if you see this nail tip here, you see I can bend it, right? And there's no heavy creases there. There's no lines in there. That means it's a flexible nail tip. So how does that affect you? Well, how it affects you as the client is, let's say I go to open my car door, if you've ever done this before, and your hand slips and it bends your nail back. So you feel the pain from where it bent your nail back, but the nail didn't break. And that's because whatever tips they used, they were flexible nail tips, which means you can maneuver better. So especially us in this industry, we're picking things up. You may be lifting the box from where your supplies came in, and you may have set it on your hand the wrong way, and it'll bend the nail, but it won't break because it's a flexible plastic. So they're not so easy to break off. Also, what I want to tell you about nail tips, and I'm fortunate that these are good. Now, this goes from 0 to 9. Usually it goes from 0 to 10, or it'll go from 1 to 10. But just remember, the lower the number, that's your larger tip. The smaller the number, the smaller the size of the tip is, right? So if you want to know some good nail tips, my favorite go-to companies are OPI, because I've worked with them for years, and Young Nails, because I've worked with them for years. Harmony, because I've worked with them for a long time. And when I say that, I mean educating in classes, working with those products. So those are my go-tos as far as what I think is of good value when it comes to nail tips. OPI has some weird shaped tips, but my favorite with them is the structure tips, because they have the perfect smile line. It's nice and deep. So if you're doing pink and whites, or if you're doing colored acrylics with the clear structured tips, it's awesome. Easy Flow, but I'm not sure if Easy Flow still makes nail tips. You know, they sold and went public. It's probably been about a good 10 years now. What I mean is they kind of sold out to like Sally's and stuff, so you can find their stuff in Sally's. Usually Young Nails, you cannot find their stuff in a store. You have to go on their website. OPI, you can find like Cosmo Prof, but you have to be licensed to get it. So I like those kinds of things because everything that we do should not be accessible to the public, because you had special training and your license, so you should, we should be able to have our own thing, and so you can have your own thing with those companies. The tips are flexible, they don't just break or, deep white lines in them. So before I mouth off too much, I want to tell you about the different types of tips there are. You know that they're plastic. You want a flexible plastic. There's 3 types of tips. There's full well, there's half well, and then there's a no well. So I don't have all 3 of those kind. The kind that I ordered for demo purposes is the full well. So the full well, you see it has the whole thing in there, right? If it's a half well, you'll see where it has the smile line in it, but there'll be like a little ledge in there. So in other words, you can only put the tip back so far, and because that little ledge is there, it won't let you push it back any further. And you shouldn't. That's actually a good thing. You shouldn't have the nail tip way up here unless it's a full-fledged press-on tip, which I know those things are hot now. There's Dashing Diva. I have students who make those kind of tips where they're like press-ons. You just put the whole tip on. So that's a whole nother procedure, and maybe I'll demonstrate that too, because I do have some beautiful tips that I bought from one of my former students, and her business name is Cosmia Beauty, Cosmia Beauty, and that's her Instagram address. But she makes these intricate designs in their press-on tips. So full well, then there's the half well, and it has the smile line, but underneath the tip you'll see a little ledge in there, so it's like a stopper. And then no well tips, you'll see the smile line, but you could slide that tip all the way up. In fact, I think the structure tips from OPI is a no well tip. So it has a nice smile line, but if you slide it up too far, which it could look weird if you do that, but if you slide it up too far, you have access to do that. Okay, now getting into the procedure for nail tips. Nail tips is a pretty simple procedure. However, you have to be mindful and not rush through it, because when you do, that's where the mistakes come in, and that's where accidents can happen, where someone gets a fungus or the nail just pops off, right? Some materials that you need nail glue, of course, or resin. That will be up to you. Watch the video. You need tip cutters or toenail clippers. Now, I just saw somewhere where somebody said you cannot use toenail clippers to do nail tips. That is false, because I've done it for years. I actually taught it that way until tip cutters came out and became like a big thing. Then I started using both. But I will show you, you can do nail tips with tip cutters. You just have to go half and half, bend it up and twist it off. So you have to be careful. What else did I say? Tip cutters or toenail clippers, nail glue or nail resin. Of course, you need nail tips. You need a buffer, and you need a nail file. And in this case, I would be using an acrylic file with, I use the 100/180 grit. 100/150 grit is good too. Now, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before in a prior video, but I'm just going to say it again. There's numbers on some of your buffers and some of your nail files. So just remember, the higher the number, the softer the file or the buffer is. Okay, so if you find something that's 240 grit, that means it's very mild. You're not going to have... it's not going to buff down too much. It's just going to lightly smooth. The lower the grit, the more coarse the file is, the more coarse the buffer is. Now, when it comes to acrylic files, usually I don't work below 100 grit. And that's when you're filing your acrylics down. And I would use the 180, but I'll talk about that in the acrylic video, to prep the natural nail for the acrylic, right? But when I'm filing down a nail tip, I prefer to use the 100 grit side because it gets it down faster and it gets it to the thinness that I want it, and a more coarse buffer. You don't use the kind that's going to give shine. We are just focusing on really smoothing that surface out. So a more coarse buffer would be good as well. First thing you want to do when you're doing nail tips is you want to size up the person's nails. So in other words, you want to make sure, I don't know why I sealed these up. You want to make sure the nail tip goes from groove to groove. So if you look at your nails, you'll see where the nail goes. It automatically fits into these grooves, or they call them the nail folds. And the folds is that skin that folds over the nail that holds it in. Otherwise, the nail could just pop off, right? Without much effort. But you want to make sure when you're sizing up the nail, let's see. Okay, that's not a good fit. So I got to go a little bigger. Dang, that's still not a good fit. What the? Oh no, let me go lower. Sorry. That's better. You want it to fit from groove to groove comfortably. Now, this is what I used to say in class. If you can't find a nail that fits from groove to groove, I would rather you use a larger nail tip and file it down to fit from groove to groove than to get a smaller tip and try to squeeze it and put pressure on the stress point of your nail tip, because once you've forced it to flare out to fit from groove to groove, it doesn't have much strength there. So that means the least bit of pressure he or she goes to grab something, the nail just snap, comes right off, right? So just remember that. Better to get a larger tip if you can't find the right size. File it down to the right size, and then it'll fit better and it'll be less stress. Because this point in here is what we call the stress point. So when you have that on there, if you're pushing that down, you're putting stress on that stress point there. And then when you have acrylic on top of it, which is makes it more heavy, it just makes it more easy to just go psh. So you want it to fit from groove to groove. You've done that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to trim their natural nails down, file them with an emery board, shape them up. A lot of times what I've noticed is the nail techs, what they will do, which is unfortunate, is when they see that person's nails are growing out, they're lazy, so they won't do a new full set. They will turn that person's nails over, take a file bit, a drill bit, and thin their natural nail out inside of the nail tip instead of soaking those nails off, trimming their nails down. If that person's going to keep getting full sets, then it's advisable to keep your nail short, because when they thin that out like that, it's like taking paper, and just imagine me trying to sit this on the paper. If I let go of this, is that gonna last? If it does, I'm magic. But if it doesn't, just think of that. That's for acrylics. So when you set acrylics on top of the nail tip, on top of a paper thin nail, more likely to come off, right? And it's going to be painful because it's going to tear off some of their real nail. But we'll get more into that in the acrylic videos, because I have so much to tell you with that. You know, there's a lot of things that unfortunately people don't do correct. You know, a lot of times you have to remember, a lot of nail professionals still in this day and era are not going to school and having formal training, but they are growing up in the salons, watching their family members, and then they just get right into it. So they're not doing it correct. They're just in a hurry to get that money from the clients. They're not really caring about the condition of their nails. And in fact, I'm going to do a podcast about this, about why people think it's okay to be abused in the salons. Because just from me talking to my students, I've learned that they will allow for these nail techs to use used files on them, used buffers, use the wrong electric nail bits on their nails. They won't say a word. They will pay, and it's not just my students, but clients will pay full price for their full set and give them a tip. And they feel something is not right, but they won't say anything about it. So that's a whole nother thing. But be that as it may, your natural nails should be short, because then you have more strength with the nail tip and it won't weaken your natural nail plate, right? So trim it, file it, shape it up. Then whether you use nail glue or nail resin, it's up to you how you want to do this. Oh, and also, I didn't put that on my procedure. But in the textbook, it says you can use a nail dehydrant. Now, what's a nail dehydrant? It is not the same as a primer, which we'll talk about all that in acrylics as well. Nail dehydrant just helps to remove excess oils out of the nail plate. There's a key thing to prepping nails. The first step you do is you wash the hands. Your client should go and wash their hands in soap and water. Why? Because that's the first step to removing oils off of the skin and off of their nail plates that came from the skin, right? 2, the key is for us as the nail tech not to run our fingers over their fingers all the time. What's in our fingertips? Oils. So if you continue to go like this every time there's dust on their nails, well, you're putting oils back in there, right? And so if this is something we want to last, then don't run your fingers over it. What I've taught all these years and what I do is I use either a little lint-free wipe to get rid of the dust, or I will use a paper towel and just wipe the dust off from where I filed or where I buffed. I don't put my fingers in there. And so once you get in that habit, you won't be running your fingers over, right? But you can do a nail dehydrant on the nail plate prior to gluing the nail tip on. I personally have never done that, but I would definitely try it, especially if that person is known for their tips just popping off. And they say, oh, Miss Vonnie, no matter what I do, my nails do not last. A lot of times it's because their skin is oily and those oils move on to the nail plate. And so it's more susceptible to popping off, right? But that's when you would choose possibly to use a nail resin to see if that would last longer. So after that, it's up to you if you want to apply the glue or resin over the nail, the natural nail, just slightly over that free edge there. Or you could apply it in the wale of the tip, which is usually what I do. And personally, I prefer brush-on glue or nail resin because it just works better for me. I could do both. I can use the drop, but I prefer the brush-on. It just makes my life easier. And then you take the tip, I hold it upright, and then I place it down on the nail like this. In other words, I do not come... Oh, Bonnie, come on, get with it. Just stop putting it in there. In other words, I do not take the tip and just go down like this, because you could end up gluing the tip on like this, which leaves an opening there. So I go straight up like this and come like that. So it ends up being flush with the nail. Then I check underneath. There's no opening there. So that means no water can get through. And once I put it down, I slightly rock the tip side to side, which I'll show you more in my demo. But you rock it side to side just to make sure that that glue is evenly spreading across. And then you take your tip cutter or your toenail clippers and you cut. Now with the toenail clippers, you do it a little different because you put the side there and you clip half, go to the other side, clip the half, bend it up, twist it off. Very simple. Tip cutters, you know, you go up to a certain part of the nail, however long they're wanting it. And then there's different ways you can angle the tip cutter to get the nail to come out this way or come shorter. Or like if you want it to come like this, or yeah. And then there's some tip cutters that I had a pair and I don't know where it is, but it has a little box or carton on the outside of it. So let's say if you want it short, medium, or long, you would snap on, let's say, the short. So then the tip cutter would go all the way up. The tip could only go so far in there. And then when you cut, the tip just goes inside of the container. But you would automatically have short nails and it wouldn't get any shorter than that. Then you had medium and long. And my goodness, of course, when I'm doing videos, I don't have it. Go figure. After that, you want to take your acrylic file, you want to file it and shape it. Of course, you're going to ask your client, how does he or she want their tips shaped, right? But nowadays, they have so many tips that are already pre-shaped, so that's something else. What I'm showing you is the basic foundation on how to get nail tips on. So you file them, you shape them up. The acrylic file, because emery boards are made for the natural nails. So if you're using emery boards to help file down nail tips and you're wondering why it's taking so long, it's because they're not made for artificial nails. They are made for your natural nails, right? You file them down. You place glue or resin over the bump, which we call the seam. So when you glue a nail tip on, you know there's a bump there. You put glue or resin on there, you let it dry. You take I personally take my acrylic file and file it down to thin it out. And then I put glue over it again. And then I buff it. So that way it's totally flush in with the nail. And you cannot tell that person has on a nail tip. You should not be able to tell. It just looks like their nail. And then you would do cuticle oil, have them go wash their hands. You could do gel polish on top. You could do regular polish on top, but when you do that, you should just see the nail. You should not see the hump in there from the nail tip. Now this procedure is totally different, you guys, from doing an acrylic overlay. That I will show you, because when you're putting acrylic on the nail tip, you actually don't have to blend it at the seams, though some nail techs will. They use the electric file to blend in at the seam, and you can, but you don't have to. So I think, let's see, is there anything else that I need to tell you all? I think that is it as far as nail tips go. So the only thing that I need to show you is actually how to do it. All right. So next time I will show you the demonstration on how to do nail tips correct. And that is all I have for you guys. I want to thank you so much. And again, please remember what I said. If you like these videos, please share it with your peers, share it with your friends, and like the video. I would appreciate it. Bye, guys.